not that complicated. The tax cuts that were introduced in 2001, 2003, 2010, those were extended, and they're all about to expire at the end of the year. So on midnight,
is President Obama starting to sweat?
then everybody's taxes go up. And for the average family, that could mean
Is his strategy of browbeating the Republicans working?
consumers have a lot less money to make purchases, which means businesses are going to have a lot less customers, which means that
Cricket 3-4.
could slow down at a time when
President Obama pulled two surprises on the Republicans. He wanted authority to raise the debt ceiling, and he wanted to extend the unemployment compensation.
going up for the vast majority of Americans. And this was a major
Surprised the Republicans twice with additional requests.
taxes where they are for 98% of Americans.
Republicans fell back on their principles.
But if we're serious about deficit reduction, we should make sure
You
that
raise
we
taxes,
do a little bit more
you're fired!
cuts to reduce our deficit and put our economy on a long-term trajectory of growth. We have been talking to the Republicans ever since the election was over. They have had trouble saying yes to a number of repeated offers. Yesterday I had another meeting with the leadership, and I suggested to them if they can't do a comprehensive package, a smart deficit reduction, let's at minimum make sure that people's taxes don't go up and that 2 million people don't lose their unemployment insurance. And I was modestly optimistic yesterday, but we don't yet see an agreement, and now the pressure's on Congress to produce. If they don't, what I've said is that in the Senate, we should go ahead and introduce legislation that would make sure middle-class taxes stay where they are, and there should be an up or down vote. Everybody should have a right to vote on that. If Republicans don't like it, they can vote no, but
Now he's going back to what McConnell's
for
wanted.
making sure that middle-class families are helped.
If you go over what's the impact?
He's falling back on the move that McConnell actually made.
Well, it's hard to speculate on the markets. but-
McConnell called for a vote in the Senate also.
And investors are going to feel more negative about
It wasn't real clear if they did have enough Democrats to push it through.
People generally felt.
And it certainly would not make it through the House of Representatives.
Continue to tick down. Housing will continue to improve.
So the president's idea of introducing legislation into the Senate for an up or down vote isn't really good for not raising taxes on January 1.
That we haven't seen the kind of deficit reduction that we could have had.
His idea isn't any good.
Take the deal that I gave them. If they say that
Break it 3-4.
which means consumer spending is going to be
He
depressed.
went for the entire sack of gold. And he's going to have is a legacy of raising taxes on the American public.
Of this deal, you've got half of
The
those
very people that voted for
The
him
other part of the fiscal
are now going to have to pay an additional $3,000 a year.
$1.2 trillion in spending. They put a committee together to try to come up with those numbers. They didn't figure out how to do it. And so what we now have is a situation where these automatic spending cuts go into place. Now, if we have raised some revenue by the wealthy paying a little bit more, that would be sufficient to turn off what's called the sequester, these automatic spending cuts. And that also would have a better outcome for our economy long term. But, so far at least, Congress has not been able to get this stuff done, not because Democrats in Congress don't want to go ahead and cooperate, but because I think it's been very hard for Speaker Boehner and Republican Leader McConnell to accept the fact that taxes on the wealthiest Americans should go up a little bit as part of the overall deficit reduction package.
Well, you talk about dysfunction in Washington. You signed this legislation setting up the fiscal cliff 17 months ago. How accountable are you for the fact that Washington can't get anything done and that we are at this deadline again?
Well, I have to tell you, David, if you look at my track record over the last 2 years, I
So
cut
realistically, what
spending
can lawmakers
by over
do
$1
with
trillion
so
in
little
2001.
time left on the clock?
I campaigned on the promise of being willing to reduce the deficit in a serious way,
So the 48-hour scramble,
balanced
that's where we
approach
are.
of spending
If
cuts
they can come to an
and
agreement in the Senate,
tax increases
lawmakers
on the
still have
wealthy
to
while
write the
keeping
bill,
middle-class
produce
taxes
something
low.
that can pass
I put
both
forward a very
chambers.
specific
Will they
proposal
get
to
it
do
done?
that.
Is there enough time?
I negotiated with Speaker Boehner in good faith and moved more than halfway in order to achieve a grand bargain. I offered over $1 trillion in additional spending cuts
Too late, man.
so that we would have
You pulled too many surprises. It is too late.
I think anybody objectively who's looked at this would say that
You went for the gusto and now you're going to upset 98% of the United States citizens.
people, including close to half of Republicans.
So when they say leadership falls on you, Mr. President, you don't have a role here? And, well, Rick-
All the people that voted to raise taxes on the rich people will now be taxed themselves.
Good offers. Then I also have an obligation to American people to make sure that the entire burden of deficit reduction doesn't fall on the seniors who are relying on Medicare. I also have an obligation to make sure that families who rely on Medicaid to take care of a disabled
All the grandpa and grandmas that are living on dividend returns will have their dividends
they're not
taxed.
paying higher taxes when millionaires and billionaires are
Shoulda, woulda, coulda, voted Republican.
a basic fairness that is at stake in this whole thing, where the American people understand, and they listened to an entire year's debate about it. They made a clear decision about the approach they prefer, which is a balanced, responsible package. They rejected the notion that the economy grows best from the top down. They believe that the economy grows best from the middle class out. And at a certain point, it is very important for in Congress to be willing to
The
say
constituency to vote Republicans into office told them that they can hold office if they do not raise
You
taxes.
said that Republicans have a hard time saying yes.
The only reason they're in office is because they pledged not to raise
that's
taxes.
something you're probably going to have to ask them, because, David, you follow this stuff pretty carefully. The offers that I've made to them have been so fair that a lot of Democrats get mad at me. I mean, I offered to make some significant changes to our entitlement programs in order to reduce the deficit. I offered not only $1 trillion and over $1 trillion in spending cuts.
3 weeks ago, President Obama could have just barely squeaked by some edgy
In the
pledges.
next 10 years. And would
Then he surprised everybody with a request for debt ceiling authority.
The way they're behaving
Request denied.
is making sure that tax breaks for the wealthiest
He
Americans
surprised everybody again.
overriding.
Request for unemployment extension.
I think what's going to be important is that they listen to the American people. Now,
taking their time on that as
you know,
well. We will
the,
ask House Budget Committee member, South Carolina
I
Republican
think
Congressman
that
Mick
over the
Mulvaney,
next 48
when he
hours,
joins us
my
live
hope
a
is that
little later
people
this hour. He is
recognize
The
worried.
two surprises that President Obama pulled on the
the
legislator
top priority has to
put
be
the
to
Republicans
ensure
back on their
taxes on
principles.
middle-class families do not go up.
They fell back on their constituency principles, and now the Americans will be taxed across the board because of President
That's
Obama.
something we all agree on. If we can get that done, that takes a big bite out of the fiscal problem. It avoids the worst outcomes. And we're then going to have some tough negotiations in terms of how we continue to reduce the deficit, grow the economy.
Because this fight comes back. Now, I want to ask you specifically about entitlements, Medicare and Social Security. Are you prepared in the first year of your second term to significantly reform those two programs, to go beyond the cuts you suggested to benefits in Medicare, that your own debt commission suggested you'd have to do if you were really going to shore up Medicare at least? Are you prepared to do that in your first year of the second term?
What I've said is I am prepared to do everything I can to make sure that Medicare and Social Security are there, not just for this generation, but for future generations.
You got to talk tough to seniors, don't you?
But I already have. David, as you know, one of the proposals we made was something called change CPI, which sounds real technical, but basically makes an adjustment in terms of how inflation is calculated on Social Security. Highly unpopular among Democrats, not something supported by AARP, but in pursuit of strengthening Social Security for the long term, I'm willing to make those decisions. What I'm not willing to do is to have the entire burden of deficit reduction rest on the shoulders of seniors, making students pay higher student loan rates, ruining our capacity to invest in things like basic research that help our economy grow. Those are the things that I'm not willing to do. And so,
would you commit to that first year of your second term, getting significant reform done, telling Congress we got to do it in the first year?
But David, I want to be very clear. You are not only going to cut your way to prosperity. One of the fallacies I think that has been promoted is this notion that deficit reduction is only a matter of cutting programs that are really important to seniors, students, and so forth. That has to be part of the mix. But what I ran on, and what the American people elected me to do, was to put forward a balanced approach, to make sure that there's shared sacrifice, that everybody is doing a little bit more. And it is very difficult for me to say to a senior citizen, or a student, or a mom with a disabled kid, you are going to have to do with less. But we're not going to ask millionaires and billionaires to do more. That's not something that's not an approach that the American people think is right.
Yeah, you were voted on that. Now your strategy is going to cost the very people
when folks
put him in
office, folks who are striving to get in the middle class, when they do well.
But I'm asking you about time frame because, as you well know, as a second-term president now, about to become a second term, your political capital, even having just won re-election, is limited. So what is the single priority?
But he had.
What is the equivalent to health care?
Break it, 3-4.
There are a couple of things.
Davey Boy says your political capital, now that you're re-elected, is still limited.
I will introduce legislation in the first year to get that done. I think we have talked about it long enough. We know how we can fix it. We can do it in a comprehensive way that the American people support.
The strategy taken by the president counted on more political capital than he had.
Make sure it's growing. Part of that is deficit reduction. Part of it is also making sure that we're investing.
Didn't have the political capital that he spent when pushing through the Universal Health Care Act.
People back to work, rebuilding our roads, our bridges, our schools. In part, paying for it by
not like the first time around, Bubba.
Deficit reduction measures that need to take place. That will grow the economy at the same time as we're also setting our path for long-term fiscal stability. Number three, we've got a huge opportunity around energy. We are producing more energy. America can become an energy exporter. How do we do that in a way that also deals with some of the environmental challenges that we have at the same time? So that's going to be a third thing. But the most immediate thing I've got to do, starting on January 1st, if Congress doesn't act before the end of the year, is make sure that taxes are not going up on middle-class families. And because it is going to be very hard for the economy to sustain its current growth trends if suddenly we have a huge bite taken out of the average American's paycheck.
Those are four huge things, and you didn't mention after Newtown, although I know you're thinking about it, new gun regulations.
Yes.
Mayor Bloomberg of New York told me a couple of weeks ago on this program that ought to be your number one agenda item. You know how hard this is. Do you have the stomach for the political fight for new gun control laws?
David, I think anybody who was up in Newtown, who talked to the parents, who talked to the families, understands that something fundamental in America has to change. And all of us have to do some soul searching, including me as president, that we allow a situation in which 20 precious small children are getting gunned down in the classroom. And I've been very clear that an assault rifle ban, banning these high-capacity clips, background checks, that there are a set of issues that I have historically supported and will continue to support.
But can you get it done? I mean,
and so the question is, are we going to be able to have a national conversation and move something through Congress. I'd like to get it done in the first year. I will put forward a very specific proposal based on the recommendations that Joe Biden's task force is putting together as we speak. And so this is not something that I will be putting off. But
the NRA said it's just not going to work. It didn't work before, it's not going to work now.
You know, my response is something has to work. And, you know, it is not enough for us to say this is too hard, so we're not going to try. So
inspect the weapons!
All the stakeholders together. I will meet with Republicans. I will
have yearly inspection of Code 1 assault rifles.
Majority of responsible gun owners out there.
You can call it the Jeff Act.
We can't have a situation in which somebody with you know, severe psychological problems is able to get the kind of high-capacity weapons that this individual in Newtown obtained and gunned down our kids. And yes, it's going to be hard.
So we have an armed guard at every school in the country? That's what the NRA believes. They told me last week that could work.
You know, I'm not going to prejudge the recommendations that are given to me. I am skeptical that the only answer is putting more guns in schools. And I think the vast majority of the American people are skeptical that that somehow is going to solve our problem. And look, here's the bottom line.
Breaking 3-4 JeffandJess.com.
And so this is not going to be
JeffandJess.com on CH34.USX01.5 I-75 27 345 MHz. Don't let them collect the money.
You know, the old adage of Abraham Lincoln that with public opinion.
It'd be real simple for an executive leader to say, the first thing we're going to do on gun control is make sure that we can do a background check on anybody that wants a background check in 1 day.
An argument to the American people about
it currently takes up to 2 weeks.
Why we have to do
if we had an executive leader that was fairly smart,
Sandy Hook Elementary does not
he would say, well, the first thing we're going to do is be able to do a background check.
That's right. We are willing to make different choices for the country, and we support.
He was smart enough to be in office.
We're willing to take those actions, and will there be resistance? Absolutely.
Breaking 3-4 JeffandJess.com. If he was smarter, he would say something like,
by what happened.
first thing we're going to do is make sure that we can do a background check in 24 hours.
It gets a lot of attention.
We might even do a background check in 5 minutes.
Won't feel like that to me. This is something that, you know, that was the worst day of my presidency, and it's not something that I want to see.
You can call it the Jeff Act, Mr. President.
A couple of foreign policy notes. After the attack in Benghazi, is there a need for more accountability so that this doesn't happen again? And do you know who was behind the attack at this point?
2 points. Number one, I think that Tom Pickering and Mike Mullen, who headed up the review board, did a very thorough job in identifying what were some severe problems in diplomatic security. And they provided us with a series of recommendations. Many of them were already starting to be implemented. Secretary Clinton has indicated that she is going to implement all of them. My message to the State Department has been very simple, and that is, we're going to solve this. We're not going to be defensive about it. We're not going to pretend that this was not a problem. This was a huge problem, and we're going to implement every single
Break.
Some individuals did have accountable.
Break it 3-4 JeffandJess.com.
What I've said is that we have fixed this to make sure that this was not going to happen.
And you can call it the Jeff Act, Mr. President.
We understand that the damage involved, when you read the report, and it confirms what we had already seen based on some of our internal reviews, there was just some sloppiness, not intentional, in terms of how we secure embassies in areas where you essentially don't have governments that have a lot of capacity to protect those embassies. So we're doing a thorough review. Not only will we implement all the recommendations that were made, but we'll try to do more than that. With respect to who carried it out, that's an ongoing investigation. The FBI has sent individuals to Libya repeatedly. We have some very good leads, but this is not something that I'm going to be at liberty to talk about right now.
In the politics and the back and forth in this, do you feel like you let your friend Susan Rice hang out there to dry a little bit?
Oh, good question, Davey boy.
First of all, I think I was very clear throughout that Susan has been an outstanding UN ambassador for the United States. She appeared on a number of
just didn't have the
reporting what she and we
just didn't have the political clout like you did the first time around.
This was
that political clout was spent.
Attack on her. I mean, of all the people in my national security team, she probably had the least.
Didn't have the political clout in order to put it through the person you wanted to be Secretary of State.
Attacks
and your political clout to have authority for the debt ceiling and tax the rich and unemployment compensation and various other social programs is a lot less than the first time around.
But most Americans recognize that these were largely politically motivated attacks as opposed to being justified.
You have another series of cabinet choices to make. Former Senator Chuck Hagel has come under criticism for some comments he's made, including about a former ambassador nominee during the Clinton years, that being gay was an inhibiting factor to being gay to do an effective job. Is there anything about Chuck Hagel's record or statements that's disqualifying to you should you nominate him to run the Defense Department?
Well, first of all, I haven't made a decision about who to nominate, and my number one criteria will be who's going to do the best job in helping to secure America.
Anything disqualify him?
Not that I see. I've served with Chuck Hagel. I know him. He is a patriot. He is somebody who has done extraordinary work both in the United States Senate, somebody who served this country with valor in Vietnam, and is somebody who's currently serving on my intelligence advisory board and doing an outstanding job. So I haven't made a decision on this. With respect to the particular comment that you quoted, he apologized for it. And I think it's a testimony to what has been a positive change over the last decade in terms of people's attitudes about gays and lesbians serving our country. And that's something that I'm very proud to have led. And I think that anybody who serves in my administration understands my attitude and position on those issues.
Mr. President, as you look forward to a second term, you think about your legacy, you think about your goals. How frustrated are you at how hard it appears to be to get some of these things done? Very difficult relationship with Congress. People come up to me all the time and say, don't they realize all of them? The President, Republicans, and Democrats, how frustrated we all are.
Well, I think we're all frustrated. The only thing I would caution against, David, is I think this notion of, well, both sides are just kind of unwilling to cooperate. And that's just not true. I mean, if you look at the facts, what you have is a situation here where the Democratic Party, warts and all, and certainly me, warts and all, have consistently done our best to try to put country first and to try to work with everybody involved to make sure that we've got an economy that grows, make sure that it works for everybody, make sure that we're keeping the country safe. And does the Democratic Party still have some knee-jerk ideological positions? Are there some folks in the Democratic Party who sometimes aren't reasonable? Of course, that's true about every political party. But generally, if you look at how I've tried to govern over the last 4 years and how I'll continue to try to govern, I'm not driven by some ideological agenda. I'm a pretty practical guy, and I just want to make sure that things work. And one of the nice things about never having another election again, I will never campaign again, is I think you can rest assured that all I care about is making sure that I leave behind.
Commentary with Jeff at Jeff.com. Jeff at Jeff.com. Walking, talking, breathing, and thinking.
Than it was when I came into office. And that's going to continue to drive me. And I think that the issue that we're dealing with right now in the fiscal cliff is a prime example of it. What I'm arguing for are maintaining tax cuts for 98% of Americans. yeah, I don't think anybody would consider that some liberal left-wing agenda. So that used to be considered a pretty mainstream Republican agenda. And it's something that we can accomplish.
President says he's arguing for maintaining tax cuts for 98% of Americans.
In the House to get it done.
Well, his strategy does not reflect the truth of that statement.
You know, how far certain factors.
If he was looking out for 98% of the Americans to retain their tax cuts, how come they're going to be taxed?
It used to be considered centrist, mainstream positions on these issues. Now, are
you going to blame it on the Republicans?
Just a congenital optimist.
You are the president.
People kind of see the light. You know, Winston Churchill used
You're the one that told the 98% that they would retain their tax cuts.
Before we finally do.
You were the one that are re-elected.
We eventually do the right thing, and I think that
it's your strategy.
And I think it's also important for Americans to remember that politics has always been messy. People have been asking me a lot about the film Lincoln, and you know.
Is this your Lincoln moment?
Well, no. Look, I never compare myself to Lincoln, and B, obviously the magnitude of the issues are quite different from the Civil War and slavery. The point, though, is democracy's always been messy, and you know, we're a big, diverse country that is constantly sort of arguing about all kinds of stuff. But eventually, we do the right thing. And in this situation, I'm confident that one or two things are going to happen when it comes to the fiscal cliff. Number one, we're going to see an agreement in the next 48 hours, in which case middle-class taxes will not go up. If that doesn't happen, then Democrats in the Senate will put a bill on the floor of the Senate, and Republicans will have to decide if they're going to block it, which will mean that middle-class taxes do go up. I don't think they would want to do that politically, but they may end up doing it. And if all else fails, if Republicans do in fact decide to block it, so that taxes on middle-class families do in fact go up on January 1st, then we'll come back with a new Congress on January 4th, and the first bill that will be introduced on the floor will be to cut taxes on middle-class families. And you know, I don't think the average person is going to say, "Gosh, you know, that's a really partisan agenda on the part of either the president or Democrats in Congress." I think people will say that makes sense because that's what the economy needs right now. So, if one way or another we'll get through this, do I wish that things were more orderly in Washington and rational, and people listened to the best arguments and compromised and operated in a more thoughtful and organized fashion? Absolutely. But when you look at history, that's been the exception rather than the norm.
My interview with President Obama. Coming up, reaction to the interview and what it tells us about what his second term will look like. Joining me, NBC's Tom Brokaw, presidential historian Doris Kearns Goodwin, the executive editor at Random House, John Meacham, David Brooks of the New York Times, and our political director and chief White House correspondent, Chuck Todd. All coming up next.
We know why we're here. To chart a greener path in the air and in our factories.
To find cleaner, more efficient ways to power water.
And harness our technology for new energy solutions.
Around the globe, the people of Boeing are working together to build a better tomorrow.
That's why we're here.
Critics agree Flight is a masterpiece.
I've got control.
And now Denzel Washington is nominated for a Golden Globe, Best Actor of the Year.
No one could have landed that plane like I did.
No one. Flight, rated R.
I may have retired from the game, but not from being big. Good thing one car gives me full-size luxury at 36 miles per gallon, which is nice because I've got shoes that are bigger than most hybrids. And more stylish, too. If you don't know the luxurious yet fuel-efficient LaCrosse, you don't know Buick.
Don't wait for the new year to experience Buick. Lease this EPA-estimated 36 Highway MPG LaCrosse with 2 years of scheduled maintenance for around $299 per month.
Coming up, reaction from my roundtable this morning. You just heard the president lay out his big agenda items for the second term: immigration, the economy, energy, and middle-class tax cuts. Washington has some gun control, but can you realistically get any of them done given Washington's track record of dysfunction? Local Roundtable is here to break it all down. This brief commercial break.
Let's give thanks for an idea. A grand idea called America. The idea that if you work hard, if you have a dream, if you work with your neighbors, you can do most anything. This led to other ideas, like liberty and rock and roll, to free markets, free enterprise, and free refills. It put a man on the moon and a phone in your pocket. Our country's gone through a lot over the centuries and a half. But this idea isn't fragile. When times get tough, it rallies us as one. Every day, more people believe in the American idea. And when they do, the dream comes true. We're grateful to be a part of it.
Mr. President, Hyde Park on Hudson is hugely entertaining and funny.
We are not going to serve the King of England a cocktail!
It's like a madhouse. Bill Murray dazzles as FDR.
Forgive me for not getting up.
It's a spectacular Oscar-caliber performance, a career best, one of the year's delights.
You too comfy right there?
And now Bill Murray is the Golden Globe nominee for Best Actor.
We could have sold tickets for this dinner and made ourselves a pile of money.
Hyde Park on Hudson, based on a true story. Rated R.
I'm confident that one of two things are going to happen when it comes to the fiscal cliff. Number one, we're going to see an agreement in the next 48 hours, in which case middle-class taxes will not go up. If that doesn't happen, then Democrats in the Senate will put a bill on the floor of the Senate, and Republicans will have to decide if they're going to block it, which will mean that middle-class taxes do go up. I don't think they would want to do that politically, but they may end up doing it.
That, of course, from our interview just moments ago with the president. I sat down with him yesterday at the White House. He's putting the onus squarely on congressional leaders to either do a comprehensive package now or a short-term solution to prevent middle-class taxes from going up. Joining me now, NBC News political director and our chief White House correspondent, Chuck Todd. NBC News special correspondent, Tom Brokaw. Author of the best-selling New York Times best-selling book, Thomas Jefferson, The Art of Power, John Meacham. Columnist for the New York Times, David Brooks, and presidential historian, author of the Lincoln biography, Team of Rivals, Doris Kearns Goodwin. Welcome to all of you. David Brooks, let me start with you. My big takeaway, the president is setting a tone here with Republicans, putting them on notice that, yes, taxes are going to go up, and that he's going to drive a pretty hard bargain on a lot of different issues rather than try to bring them into the fold. He doesn't feel like compromise is going to work at this point.
Yeah, well, first, let's say what's happening in Washington right now is pathetic. When you think about what the Revolutionary generation did, what the Civil War generation did, what the World War II generation did, we're asking not to bankrupt our children, and we've got a shambolic dysfunction.
What did the World War II
Now, I think most of the blame still has to go to Republicans. They've had a brain freeze since the election. They have no strategy. You don't know what they want.
I mean, I have crap growing in my body.
But the full President Obama, I would say that sometimes he's governed like a visitor from a morally superior civilization. He comes in here and he will not, he'll talk with Boehner. He won't talk with the other Republicans. He hasn't built the trust. Boehner actually made a pretty serious concession, $800 billion.
Yeah, he was ready to go.
Probably willing to go up on rates. But the trust wasn't there to get that done.
Boehner was ready to go. He was ready to take a small concession to what the president wanted until he was surprised.
The place where Republicans say,
and then he was surprised again.
They do not feel that right now.
Chuck, just your reading of the
president might have been in La La Land thinking that he had the political clout when he was first elected.
Deal now, or we'll go over the cliff. We'll come back right after the first of the year, and we'll try to get the tax cut through again. But the Republicans are going to be forced to be at a position they're going to have to say no because we'll put it on the floor.
Yeah, there didn't seem to be a sense of urgency of, oh my God, we can't go over the cliff. Right? The president was laying it out. You know what?
Oh, there was a sense of urgency.
This is how we're going to deal with it once
until they were surprised.
We're not going to end up, in the long term, raising taxes on everybody. But he seemed to be not making today do or die, not making the next 48 hours the big thing here, which it'll be interesting to see if that's how the Republican leader, Mitch McConnell, who is the key here, right? Does he sign off on a deal? If he signs off on a deal, something will happen. Does he read that and say, boy, we need to take this tax issue off the table? He's been a big believer of this. Take the tax issue off, give the president his tax hikes. on the rich now. Fight him on everything else when taxes aren't part of the conversation. Fight him on everything else in 6 weeks when the debt ceiling is hit, or perhaps it ends up 8 weeks, 12 weeks, whenever that fight happens. And do that. I do think that McConnell, that's where he wants to be. Can he get there in the next 24 hours? That's what we don't know.
Tom Brokaw? Well, it seems to me that the middle class is going to have a day for the prom. I mean, everybody's talking about protecting the middle class here, so I think this deal will probably get done around the middle class tax cut.
Bond boy.
$400,000,
European Secret Society,
or some other number, which is going to be critically important.
Telecom.
A lot of people don't realize in the large urban and suburban areas of America, $250,000 doesn't make you rich. You got 2 kids in college at $60,000.
Did your oath to the Secret Society supersede your allegiance to the United States?
$25,000 time. So we have to have the definition of what is the middle class. To David's point, I do really believe that the president doesn't work hard enough at bringing everybody into the White House and rolling up the sleeves, having them up in the living quarters, getting them around the table, and saying, how do we get this deal done?
Did your oath to the Secret Society supersede your allegiance to the United States?
Helpful to him this morning to have said, look, we get this tax deal done. I'm here to help on Medicare and Social Security reforms. We've got to address those instead of just saying, I'm going to protect the seniors who are there and the Medicare and Medicaid recipients. Give a little something. Show good faith about what needs to be done on deficit reduction in the entitlement program.
Doris, Republicans I've talked to in the last couple of days on Capitol Hill have said, look, you know, the president meeting with all the congressional leaders, it's the first time that's happened since November 16th. This is not somebody who's been actively engaged in negotiating. He's basically saying, yet again, I've won, we're going to get this through. But the president says no. It's Republicans who just won't say yes to reasonable proposals.
Well, that may be
reasonable proposals.
I mean, we don't.
They still don't see the president sweating.
Put out, not necessarily accepted.
Davey boy still don't see that the president is sweating.
Was that I think he's learned from that first term where he was arguing to explain
reasonable proposals. Reasonable proposals like changing the Constitution to gather authority for the debt ceiling. That's reasonable.
From the bottom up, that seems to be a new phrase.
Reasonable proposals like extending the unemployment benefits for 5 years.
It has to be simple. Maybe, as Theodore Roosevelt said, my Harvard buddies might think it's commonplace. But I thought he spoke in a different tone today, more conversational, and that's...
Your level of reasonable isn't reference to really reasonable things. You're out in La La Land, Davey boy!
The president's obvious irritation, Chuck was just mentioning it before we started, at the notion that it's a pox on both houses.
Right.
And one of the president's top advisors is rather defensive on...
Oh, now you're going to spread it to both houses.
American because it's lazy journalism and punditry and has a real effect on our political system. Well, here's the reality that even his advisors have to understand. The American people, Republicans and Democrats, do look at results, or the lack thereof. So it's not lazy punditry when people are out there very frustrated with both ends of this.
Right. And they see the system as broken.
Who's the president?
As you say, it doesn't produce a result, a desirable result.
You going to put it on the Speaker of the House, or are you going to put it on the President?
Doesn't necessarily get a result.
You know, presidential politics is about wholesale and retail. As we say,
you gonna put it on the Speaker of the House, or are you gonna put it on the President?
He was doing a wholesale sell. He was using the bully pulpit.
Who is President?
He was making an intellectual case and trying to say, I won, this is what you voted for, this is what we adjudicated in the election. But on the retail side, as Tom says, all evidence suggests he has not been the warmest and fuzziest of cajolers. And you have to do both. And you can't just be right on the idea. You do have to sell this. And even the greatest presidents, let's be clear, Ronald Reagan of the modern era, Ronald Reagan, Bill Clinton, they sold their initial deals in the first year. Kemp Roth for Reagan and the tax rates for Clinton. And it was close. It was 1, 2, 3 votes. It was very tight. But they did it and they pushed on both the wholesale and the
I
retail.
don't think you can have the congressman over too often. I think they should be there sleeping with you if you want them to. But on the other hand, he's...
Some people in trouble.
I mean, it's like...
You know, these Civil War era people, Doris, you know.
But I think he finally has made a decision, perhaps, that the inside game didn't work. He said that, which means he mobilized the outside game.
His inability to try the inside game. But let's make sure we're about to come up on the least productive Congress in history. We have it in mathematical terms. 218 bills this Congress has passed. It's the lowest number since this has been tracked. The lowest number before that was 333. let's go through the highlights of this Congress. No farm bill. By the way, milk prices seem to be going up. We both talked about the milk cliff. That debacle we saw in the Senate on the UN Disability Treaty right in front of Bob Dole, that was just a bizarre moment, if you will. This fiscal cliff, 3 budget standoffs. This Congress has been uniquely atrocious.
Tom, the fact is that the system is rigged. 75% of the congressmen come from gerrymandered districts in which they're bulletproof.
Buzz Von Boys, tell them the truth.
There are no swing states.
The system is
rigged. They have to prove their case because they've got a choir back home. And
how can we get rid of the rigging?
Problem here. There's another reality in this town today. They need a lighter moment here. A lot of folks, as I was coming into the office,
how can we get rid of the rigging?
Kickoff time tonight.
How to remove the rigging, Brokaw, since you're saying the system is rigged.
Clinch today. That's not important. David, I want to
remove the rigging.
To go back to the president's argument that, you have to be able to say yes to something that's reasonable.
Made a true statement.
Charles Krauthammer and other conservatives have argued that he's effectively exposed big internal divisions in the Republican Party that they have yet to work out, which prevents them from getting
divisions
to
in the Republican Party.
Compromise to them.
There was divisions.
Right, well, Boehner was close to a deal.
There was divisions in the political party of Republicans.
Because he couldn't sell the senior leadership.
Till the two big surprises.
Giving away what they needed to do tax reform.
President Obama's two big surprises unified the political party of Republicans.
In some sense, the Republicans are being shambolic.
They fell back on their principles.
But in another sense,
if you raise taxes, you're fired.
To the incentive structure there within. The big lie in this whole thing is that we've got this sensible country with a
3 weeks ago, they might have been able to edge past their constituency on a couple different regions.
Politician prevents them from doing that, and therefore,
not today.
Republicans, if they cut entitlements, they will punish Democrats if they cut entitlements. So what you saw today was the president shifting the attention from debt reduction to tax cuts, which is the easy thing. Right. So I think the problem is centrally in the country, and the politicians look like idiots because they're responding to horrible incentives.
And it's interesting.
That's a great word.
Yeah. What does shambolic mean exactly?
It's not British.
Okay. But Tom, when you, I'm not afraid of it. I thought I'd let it go the first time. The second time, I had to say I don't really know what you meant. Tom, you interviewed then candidate Obama in 2008. You asked him then, would you get Medicare and Social Security reform done in your first 2 years? He said, well, Tom, I don't know if I can do that, but certainly in the first term. I asked him to make a commitment for the first year of his second term. He's not prepared to do that. This is the driver, David. You recently linked to a Weekly Standard piece about you're going to run out of discretionary money to do the things the president wants to do if he doesn't take on entitlements.
They've got to address it, and the president, I think, could help himself a lot if he were tougher on the AARP, for example, and said, look, it's not about the people at the bottom for whom Medicare really is the lifeline. It's about all the people, including those of us around the table, who get the same benefits, members of our family who are very working class. My brother, has a really great working class career working for the telephone company. But there's a big disparity between what I'm worth and what he's worth. But we get the same benefits at the end of the day. There's something wrong with that. And, the fact of the matter is that we're all living longer as well. Social Security can go up if you give it some lead time to retire at 67. And probably 20 years from now, to retire maybe at 70 because people are staying in the workplace longer. He ought to be able to raise those issues in a way that he can begin to sell them to sell to the American people the idea that we've got fundamental reforms that we have to do, as David says, downstream, because we are going to bankrupt not just our children,
but this goes on the Republicans a little bit. If they want this, right, and McConnell, I think, does. I'm not sure going to your incentive structure here, they demagogued Medicare to their own success. A lot of them got into Congress demagoguing Medicare. But if they want this, and this is all they're going to, need a Democratic president to sign the legislation. It can never harm, the Republican Party can't have it where it's all one party that does this with Social Security and Medicare. And they have got to be willing to say, all right, if they want to do this, they're going to have to give on something that they don't like, maybe even higher tax. And that's where the moment was there. They almost got this president to move on Social Security. They almost got him to move on Medicare reform, and they didn't take the.
Let me bring up
reality. At the end of the day, they're going to walk away from this without any spending restraint. We're going to get a deal which will do nothing on deficit.
And nothing even with the sequester issues.
Yeah.
John Mitchell,
I totally agree with that.
Let me bring up the gun issue. The president said he'll put up his full weight behind his first year. gun control legislation.
The president had a deal. There was a
The
deal.
question still stands: does he have the stomach
Until he
for
come
how
out with
difficult
one of
this is gonna be
his
politically?
constitutional
I'm
power.
not sure.
I'm not either. There's a great line in Tom Sawyer where
There was a
Tom Sawyer
deal.
says that
There was a deal until the president wanted to assert constitutional
I
power.
worry that our attention span on these things is so limited. You had to bring up the question of guns as the president was laying out his second-term agenda. It is one of these cultural, political issues where you have a ferociously well-organized opposition and a more diffuse, common sense, broader population. And I think that's what attention is. That also, by the way, is not the well-organized interest.
Make it real clear, the onus is on the president.
Is not just limited to guns.
Not only for being the president, for applying his strategy.
94 passes the House by 4 votes, and that was a Democratic House.
and by the way, it had a lot of loopholes in it. I wrote a copy of a magazine I'm sure the rest of you don't get at your home, but I do. It's called Shotgun News. And
Smarty over here.
and this is for people who own guns and are gun collectors and some are gun nuts. Not all of them, obviously. But the fact is, it's all about what we call assault weapons. And there are lots of variations on it. This entire publication is dedicated to the idea that there are lots of new what they call platforms for AR-15s, and there are ways that you can change the barrels, you can change the stock, you can change the trigger mechanism.
This is the gun used in Newtown.
Yeah, and the fact of the matter is that everybody talks about it as if it's one weapon. It's not. It's a lot of variations on the same weapon, so they always find a way to do around it. And there is no more, in my judgment, unified constituency in America than the passionate gun owners. They're out there, and they believe, so many of them believe the government is going to knock down their door and take their guns away. And what I say, if we get to that, we got a lot of bigger problem than guns. We're an anarchy.
Let me get there isn't an 89-page. What do we have here? A 92-page newsletter against assault weapons. Right.
All right.
We'll come back to this. I want to get a break in here. I was in Kentucky over Christmas. Saw a bumper sticker that said a lot of things. I am the NRA and I vote. Right. And they will on this issue. We'll get a quick break in here. Talk about the president's priorities for a second term and what's really possible. More with our roundtable after this.
You could, if you had your weapon inspected, you.
Having such a great year in the Gulf, we've decided to.
If the IR-15 was inspected every year, any modifications to it would have to be wrote down. As long as they didn't try to jam through a $200 fee and just made it $20 when you go down to the dealer,
Come to the Gulf. You'll have a great time.
it wouldn't bother people.
You mean Mississippi? That's Florida. Brought to you by BP and Gulf
Breaking 3-4, JeffandJess.com. Walking, talking, breathing, and thinking. Commentary with Jeff. Jeffs.com. J-EFFS.com.
Nightly News. It's D-Day for the fiscal cliff with your money and the economy at stake. What it means for us all. The very latest NBC Nightly News with Brian Williams. Monday.
This holiday season, make a resolution to get out more. Much more. Hurry in to the BMW Happier New Year event and make a resolution you want to keep. Receive your holiday credit of up to $3,500 on select models and take advantage of no-cost maintenance on all new BMWs.
Come on, join our ranks. You will prefer to Community Bank.
I am Dr. Oz. Have a happy and healthy New Year.
Count on Peter Bush, only on NBC2 News.
We're back with more from our roundtable. We'll get some of the headlines that the president made on the wires here before we're through. But Doris Kearns Goodwin, how does the president set priorities in a second term? He's got a pretty long list there and a pretty difficult environment in which to operate.
Well, the most important thing a president has to do, knowing he has limited capital, is decide where do I put my ambitions, where do I hold back. FDR once said, I'm like a cat. I know when to pounce and when to pull back.
And he put his
So I think the
ambitions
fact
on
that he did not mention gun control
usurping
makes him
constitutional
understand
power.
that unless he can argue public sentiment to overcome the enormous special interests, that's going to be a much harder one. Immigration, right at the top. And that's the one where he can mobilize that base. It's the base that elected him. It's going to make it harder for Republicans. If he were to get immigration through, he starts on a successful platform and then maybe moves to these other ones on
There is an incentive for Republicans to cooperate on immigration.
Yeah, the sad thing from the fiscal cliff is we're going to be stuck in trench warfare for maybe for another couple of years.
That's
I think
right, you gotta go for immigration.
but I would make sure you do it so you get the George W. Bush Republicans on your side. Do it with a Bush-type comprehensive package. Then you break the trench warfare. You get some from column A, column B, and then maybe you'll begin to do the things that you want to do. The second big issue that does the same thing.
Boehner. He had that with Boehner.
Is tax reform.
But he
the question
punched Boehner in the
Tom
mouth.
raises when we're talking about guns, that there's a larger approach. Does he have more of an opportunity on gun control if there's a big mental health aspect to it, if there's more to it, Tom?
Oh, that's what I think. I think it has to be
Yeah,
holistic.
Speaker of the House.
The fact of the matter is, I'm not an assault weapon fan of any kind, but I know people.
The president was negotiating policies, tax policies, and economic policies with a Speaker of the House that had a center to center-right constituency.
Have weapons for hunting deer or.
He was making negotiations until the president tried to assert constitutional power.
There's got to be limits of some kind. I mean, I've even talked to people who are gun owners.
Then he lost the relationship with the Speaker of the House of Representatives, who had a constituency that was closer to center than far right.
And then check it back.
And that's all the more reason why he has to use the bully pulpit to educate the country on the holistic approach you're talking about. He's got to get out of the White House more. I think he should take a train and go around the country for his vacation this summer. Talk to people about all these issues so that you can mobilize public sentiment. As Lincoln said, without it, nothing can happen. And that's still that's the goal of the second term.
I think the gun question, though, is almost less a matter of presidential leadership and more a matter of cultural leadership from people like Tom and like me. I suspect we're the only two gun owners.
He had the Speaker of the House
working with him. Independence is mine. But if you're a moderate, if you're a quail hunter,
go to the Senate.
You have to get into this and say, look, assault weapons are not what this is about. As President Clinton said, he's never known anyone who needed an assault weapon to kill a deer. And this is a case where if this is not an organic movement from the country, it's not going to work. It can't come from top down.
But let's try. I want to inject the larger political point. We have midterm elections coming up in 2 years. He's talking about immigration. There's the trench warfare on the budget and entitlements, which could take a long time, and gun control if he wants to do that this year as well. Well, and that's the thing. You got to pick. You're right. You got to pick and choose. You got to be careful. If you pick, on one hand, it could be tempting to go guns because it needs the most political capital. It's going to be the hardest slog. It's the most work. But if you do it and fail, you're not going to get anything else done. Ask George Bush when he did Social Security for had he done immigration is going to be relatively easy. Now, it's going to feel there'll be some painful moments, but you have a Republican Party of which there is incentive to get it done. You get a big victory early, and maybe that is what it does. You start, but I tell you, the fact that we're going to be stuck in these budget impasses, and it's going to keep the economy dragging down. I mean, I think that's the biggest. I mean, we've already gone over the political cliff here, if you will, with what, because the deal that happens, if it happens, is temporary. We're going to have this debt ceiling thing in 6 weeks, which is
he
just...
lost his relationship with the center to right
headlines being made here. The president saying that the U.S.
because
has
he wanted to
leads
assert
now
power.
and carried out the Benghazi
His strategy
attacks.
was...
He also touts Chuck Hagel as defense secretary, saying there's nothing disqualifying, but says he hasn't made a defense choice
real
yet.
la-la land.
The president also says failure to reach a fiscal deal would hurt the market.
Ulterior motives.
And as we've been talking
or you
about,
just
the
wanted
president
to tax
wants gun violence measures passed in 2013. Something he said in the course of our interview. We'll take another break here. Be back in just a moment.
We know why we're here. To connect our forces to what they need when they need it.
To help troops see danger before it sees them.
To answer the call of the brave and bring them safely home.
Around the globe, the people of Boeing are working together to support and protect all who serve.
That's why we're here.
first step. Blocks and replies to texts while you drive. We can live without the and. Visit sprint.com/drive.
Searching for a bank designed for investors like you? Schwab Bank was built with all the value and convenience investors want, like no ATM fees worldwide and no nuisance fees. Plus, deposit checks with mobile deposit and manage your cash and investments with Schwab's mobile app. No wonder Schwab Bank has grown to over $70 billion in assets. So if you're looking for a bank that's in your corner, not just on the corner, call, click, or visit to start banking with Schwab Bank today.
Thank you all for the discussion today and for all your contributions to the program this year. I really appreciate it. Before we go, I wanted to point out that if you missed the interview with the president, there are several opportunities to watch a rebroadcast on MSNBC that's later today at 2 p.m., 4 p.m., and 9 p.m. Eastern.
No.
And again tomorrow morning at 6 a.m.
Try to do some
for highlights from the interview, be
power.
sure to follow me on Twitter at David Gregory.
Again.
That's all for today.
Taxing
We'll be back
everybody.
next week. Until then, have a happy New Year.
Probably his real
If it's
motive is to
It's
tax
me.
everybody.
At Chevy's year-end event, we
Breaking 3-4 is the real motive of the United States president to tax everybody.
Hey,
Breaking
Where's your
3-4.
Oh, it's casual Friday.
He can tax the 98% and then spend it.
Chevy's giving more. This holiday season, get a 2013 Malibu LS for around $189 per month, or get $1,000 holiday bonus cash.
Here we go.
See the movie type magazine called Smart, Charming, Thoughtful, and Funny.
Good luck, sweetheart.
Thank you, ma'am. Nice to meet you. The Guilt Trip works.
How long are we supposed to look at it?
10 minutes. See how it's going. The Guilt Trip. Rated PG-13.
I don't know. I just can't imagine that retiring someday is even an option for Sean and me.
How did you get comfortable enough to know you could really do it?
Well, planning, of course. And we got a lot of good advice. A few years ago, your mom and I put some money into a Pacific Life fixed annuity that guarantees us an income for the rest of our lives, whether Social Security is all there or not. Hey!
To learn more about a guaranteed lifetime income from Pacific Life, visit PacificLife.com.
Want to go healthy? Don't start by lifting 400 pounds on your marathon your first day out, or jumping on some crazy bad diet. No, because small changes are easier to stick with than the big ones.
Commentary with JeffandJess.com, J-EFFS.com, Jeff on his side.